Republican congressmen are on retreat, strategizing a path forward with President Trump at his Doral resort. We've got Texas Congressman Brandon Gill here to tell us what they have planned, and the journalist who exposed Planned Parenthood can finally breathe a sigh of relief. The California Attorney General's criminal charges have been dropped. He's with us tonight exclusively. Plus, the Trump deportation surge is underway. We've got an update from an expert who has spent his entire life in border security. I hear the Trump administration is taking his advice, and we want to know what it is. We've also got the latest on DeepSeek AI and key information on confirmation for President Trump's cabinet ahead. All next on the Matt Gaetz Show. Let's do this. We're shaking up Washington, D.C. We're breaking the fever.
You ever watch this guy on television? It's like a machine. He's great. Matt Gaetz.
ICE just pulled off a nationwide sweep, and let me tell you, this isn't your average cops and robbers operation. It was like a spring cleaning, but for society's actual worst. And it's happening in the snow, at times personally led by either Border Czar Tom Homan or our newly minted DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt addressed the effectiveness of these raids in her press briefing earlier today.
On January 23rd, ICE New York arrested a Turkish national for entry without inspection who is a known or suspected terrorist. On January 23rd, ICE San Francisco arrested a citizen of Mexico unlawfully present in the United States who has been convicted of continuous sexual abuse of a child aged 14 years or younger. ICE St. Paul has arrested a citizen of Honduras who was convicted of fourth-degree criminal sexual conduct with a minor. ICE Buffalo arrested a citizen of Ecuador who has been convicted of rape. ICE Boston arrested a citizen of the Dominican Republic who has a criminal conviction for second-degree murder. This criminal was convicted of murder for beating his pregnant wife to death in front of her 5-year-old son. And ICE St. Paul also arrested a citizen of Mexico who was convicted of possessing pornographic material of a minor on a work computer. These are the heinous individuals that this administration is removing from American communities every single day, and to the brave state and local law enforcement officers, CBP, and ICE agents who are helping in the facilitation of this deportation operation, President Trump has your back, and he is grateful for your hard work.
Almost 1,000 people rounded up in 48 hours. Who made the apprehension list? Murderers, drug dealers, sex offenders? These aren't your friendly neighborhood visa overstayers. These are the stars of every true crime documentary that you skip because it's too grim. The raids weren't isolated in small towns. They were in the major cities: Chicago, Denver, Austin, Los Angeles. It's like the Sanctuary Cities All-Stars list. These are the places where their Welcome Everyone badges are worn so proudly, they basically convert their communities into safe havens for criminals. Sanctuary city leaders have a knack for acting like ICE is some sort of boogeyman hiding under the bed and waiting to pounce on unsuspecting residents. Let's clear this up. ICE is not out there targeting your sweet abuela who overstayed her visa. They're focused on people who have committed actual crimes, crimes that put people's lives at risk. And if your state or local policies are making it harder for federal agents to do their job, maybe it's time to rethink those policies and the leaders who back them. That's for you, California Governor Gavin Newsom. The raids mostly hit major sanctuary cities because why go anywhere else when the sanctuary cities are practically Airbnbs for criminals? In Chicago, they even brought Dr. Phil along for the ride. Yes, that Dr. Phil.
But you've never been deported before?
We Dr. Phil. We look like Dr. Phil.
Yeah? How do you know me?
No, I seen Dr. Phil, on TV.
Well, this is an example of sanctuary cities, right? We got an illegal alien convicted of sex crimes involving children. And he's walking the streets of Chicago. You've been charged with sex crimes with children?
Not really.
Not really? Let's take him in, process him, lock him up.
Honestly, we might be onto something sending Dr. Phil on the ICE raids. If he gives a few of these perps his trademark, "How's that working for you?" line, they might turn themselves in or self-deport. Jim Acosta is reportedly self-deporting from CNN following the announcement that he would be moving to the graveyard shift, so self-deportations do in fact happen. In all the big numbers we are hearing regarding deportations, let's not forget some of the specific cases. The target of a recent raid is a man named Sam Seda. He's a Thai national convicted of child sex offenses. Now, critics of these operations loves to paint a picture of ICE agents busting down the doors of otherwise innocent families, but that isn't what's happening here. These people aren't selling lemonade on the wrong corner or loose cigarettes. We're talking about people whose deviance would make even the most hardened people just bite their lips in fear. Here's the thinking. We're not talking about vague charges either. Many of these people have been convicted. They've had due process. They're the people who would make you triple lock your doors at night. So when critics emerge to complain about these raids, I've got one question. Are we supposed to let the people stay because what? They're misunderstood? They're trying their best? They want to live better lives. Many of these deportees have rap sheets longer than the credits on a Netflix special. Every time ICE conducts a raid, you can practically hear the wails of indignation from the usual suspects. Sanctuary city leaders, activist groups, Twitter warriors, they all come out of the woodwork to decry these operations as cruel, unnecessary, or un-American. Un-American. Last I checked, protecting the citizens of this country from murderers and drug lords, it's about as American as apple pie and baseball. These critics would love to throw words around like inhumane, draconian, as if enforcing the law is some sort of moral failing. The law exists for a reason. They're not suggestions, and when people break the law, even entering the country, that endangers others, and they forfeit their right to hide behind platitudes like human rights and compassion. Compassion should be reserved for the victims of these crimes, not the perpetrators, as Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy Stephen Miller pointed out at the White House.
This administration is going to investigate every instance of child trafficking, labor trafficking, sex trafficking, child smuggling, and all the attendant crimes involved in that. And our message to everyone in the country is to cooperate fully with Immigration and Customs Enforcement so that we can end the scourge of child trafficking and child abuse that has been endemic these last 4 years.
These raids are important, they're necessary, and if a few city leaders and armchair activists want to wring their hands about it, I guess that's their prerogative, but for the rest of us who would rather not live in a neighborhood overrun by criminal illegal aliens, let's keep the momentum going. Let's keep the raids going. Illegal aliens should be thrown out of our country faster than transsexuals are disqualified from military service. Trump did that too, by the way. Joining us now is Senior Advisor to Customs and Border Patrol, Ron Vitiello. Ron, thank you so much for being here. What are we seeing with all these immigration changes at the border and then with enforcement in the interior of the country?
Thanks, and thanks for inviting me. Yeah, what we're seeing is the historic political victory of the Trump administration, the Trump-Vance transition, turning into winning operationally on the ground at our southwest border, with the Border Patrol now being allowed to do the job they're paid to do, to go out there and make America safe by securing that border, with unprecedented help from our military in the form of airplanes sending people out of the country, military engineering units helping shore up the fence, providing access to the border. And then we've all seen the images of even the secretary going out in New York and assisting and watching and overseeing what ICE is doing in the enforcement removal operations, finding criminals who are also in the country illegally and putting them on a path for removal. So winning all across the board, but we're not tired of it yet. We want to see more of it. And we're all about getting it done on behalf of what the American people voted for and what the president has charged us to do.
We've seen some states and local jurisdictions really embrace their sanctuary status. Some legislatures have even appropriated funds to take on legal challenges with the administration as these raids persist. How is it practically playing out when you have a sanctuary policy that encounters like Kristi Noem and Tom Homan there ready to conduct their raid?
Well, that frontline work is difficult. It's hard to do logistically, and it's also, there's an officer safety risk in all of the operations that they do. In a sanctuary city, when they don't have the cooperation of the police, it's a little bit more dangerous. It's a little more, they have to be a little bit more deliberate on the planning efforts. But they can do it without that cooperation. It would be much better if these cities and towns and these jurisdictions and these woke mayors get their head out of the sand and stop pretending that massive numbers of illegal aliens in their cities is a good idea. And so we're hopeful that the Justice Department takes this on in the form of restricting grants or some version of correcting that, bad behavior and that destructive policy. But in either case, the front line of ERO is going to go out and do their job and find the worst of the worst and put those folks on a path for removal. And that'll make those cities safer, whether those mayors realize it or not.
It's such a good point I hadn't thought of. The sanctuary policies that block the coordination with local law enforcement actually put people at grave risk who are conducting these raids that they would not have to otherwise accept. And so if, God forbid, something happened to one of the DEA agents or ICE agents or ATF agents involved in these raids in a sanctuary jurisdiction where that wouldn't have to happen, the blood would be on the hands of the people who were for those sanctuary policies. So we certainly hope it doesn't come to that. I want to get into CBP because that's where you've been providing specific advice. I remember how CBP officers were just so frustrated that they had been turned into processors of illegal aliens into the country. Like, bring us to the border and tell us what happens today when an illegal alien comes to our border, and how's that different from how it would have been a few days ago?
Well, the traffic is much lower across the board on the southwest border. So those men and women that are out there on the front line protecting us have much more capability today than they've had for the last 4 years. In this 1 week, we've seen historic assistance from our heroes in the military, these flights overseas, and the ability for them to have more time on station. What does that mean? That's more agents on patrol that are rescuing people in distress, more agents to make seizures of illegal narcotics, more agents to rescue people who are being trafficked, and just prevent bad things from happening at the border, and bad things and bad people from coming in. And I'll just give you a data point because, in Washington, we're infatuated with statistics. If you take the daily average for the 365 days of 2024, the average daily encounter number at CBP was 4,200. Today, the encounters were less than 900. The day before, they were less than 1,000. And so you can see the magnitude of change that has occurred for the front line. The cartels are no longer in charge about what happens in large swaths of the border like they were during the entire Biden administration. Their business model has been upset in a very terrific way, and it is very fun to watch. It's still dangerous. There's still a lot of risk for our folks out there, but we are taking back control and securing that border and making the streets in America safer each and every day. And it's only been 7 days.
Yeah, Ron, how do you think the cartels will react? We know they're not going to just sit back and take it. You would assume they would adjust some of their tactics too, right?
We did have some agents assaulted in Fronton, Texas today, early in the morning. Some cartel members fired on our agents and fired back. Thankfully, thank God, no one was hurt or injured. But there will be a reaction. They have to change their business model now. That could turn into resistance and assaults against agents. That could be other tactics that they use. And so the front line is going to have to be more careful, plan more methodically, and do their job safer because these cartels are not going to be able to have their way at the border like they have for the last 4 years. Everything has changed for them.
Your point is well taken that as you see the military on the border, as the protocols for these encounters change, the incentive to just have people show up at the border is diminished for the cartels. And so they'll work more violence, they'll work other types of networks. And so maybe those border encounters will be less and you don't have to see thousands more troops on the border. But either way, you've got the 12 million plus that Joe Biden has released into the country. DHS has issued a memo that gives expanded authorities to ICE, to the U.S. Marshals, to ATF, to all really work together on this mission. Do you think that is a permanent change in designation, or will we see those folks go back to their regularly scheduled government jobs?
Under this administration, those kinds of additional capabilities brought to bear are going to be part and parcel of the Trump administration. And so this is a very important tool now all of these agencies will use, just like back in the 80s, the Border Patrol was given Title 21 authority to help prosecute what was called then the war on drugs. This is a lot like that. This is giving other federal agents the ability to make encounters and make arrests under the authorities of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which is a powerful tool. Half of all the stops that are made by the Joint Terrorism Task Force that's run by the FBI and contributed to by the department, half of all their stops and arrests are based on immigration authorities. And so giving that to the DEA and the ATF and parts of the FBI, et cetera, the IRS, it will give them a powerful tool to address illegal activity regardless of where it's at. And so, yeah, working together and having that coalition is going to make a big difference in the effectiveness Obviously, the officer safety and the ability to do these investigations that get at dismantling these criminal networks instead of just arresting folks.
And certainly President Trump designating a national emergency on the border gives him the power to focus these federal entities on the mission, and it's a critically important one. We want to make sure that those folks are safe out there who are encountering these very, very dangerous folks, and so thanks so much for advising them. Ron Vitiello, Senior Advisor to Customs and Border Patrol, appreciate you being on the program.
Thank you.